October 24th, 1942. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. The humid jungle air hung thick with tension as Corporal Thomas Garrett of the First Battalion, 7th Marines, crouched behind a fallen coconut log. His M1 Garand pressed tight against his shoulder, finger resting lightly on the trigger guard. The tropical night wrapped everything in near total darkness. Through the dense vegetation ahead, he heard sounds that froze his blood, cracking branches, Japanese voices whispering in the darkness, the distinctive rustle of uniforms brushing against jungle growth. They were coming. Beside Garrett, Sergeant William Morrison held his hand raised, palm open. The universal signal to hold, to wait, to not fire. Garrett could now distinguish silhouettes moving through the darkness, perhaps 150 yards out, then 100 yards, then 75. Every fibre of his being screamed to squeeze the trigger, to open fire, to stop this human tide, before it overwhelmed them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But Morrison's hand remained raised. The order was clear, insane as it seemed. Let them come. Let them get to 50 yards. Not farther, but not closer either. 50 yards exactly. Garrett had heard about the new doctrine 2 days earlier. Lieutenant Colonel Louis Chesty Puller himself had come to the forward positions to personally explain what seemed like suicidal tactics. Marines were to maintain fire discipline until the enemy reached 50 yards, then simultaneously unleash all firepower in a single coordinated, devastating volley. The theory sounded fine in the command tent. Here, in the suffocating darkness of Guadalcanal's jungle, with hundreds of Japanese soldiers approaching inexorably, it felt like pure madness. Garrett felt sweat running into his eyes. It wasn't the tropical heat making him sweat. It was raw, primitive fear of letting the enemy get so close before reacting. The silhouettes grew more distinct now. Garrett could see the outlines of their helmets, the shape of their Type 38 Arisaka rifles, even details of their uniforms. 80 yards. 70 yards. 60 yards. Morrison's hand stayed raised. Along the defensive line, other Marines held their positions, weapons pointed forward, fingers resting lightly on triggers. Nobody fired. Nobody moved. This collective restraint represented something revolutionary in Pacific warfare. Since the first engagements at Tulagi in August 1942, Marines had learned harshly that their conventional tactics worked poorly against Japanese mass assaults. Firing at 200 or 300 yards wasted ammunition, revealed positions, and allowed surviving Japanese to close in the confusion of smoke and noise. 55 yards now. Garrett could see faces. Young men like himself, tense, focused, moving through jungle toward what they believed was a weakly defended American position. Japanese intelligence had deceived them. Henderson Field was defended by some of the most determined, best-trained Marines in the Corps, armed with the finest weapons of war, and now, for the first time, employing tactical doctrines specifically designed to massacre mass infantry assaults at close range. 50 yards. Morrison's hand dropped sharply. The signal rippled instantly down the line. In the millisecond that followed, over 200 Marines, 40 Browning automatic rifles, and 20 Browning .30 caliber heavy machine guns opened fire simultaneously. The roar was deafening. Night became day as muzzle flashes illuminated the jungle. The coordinated volley hit the Japanese formation like a giant hammer. Garrett emptied his 8-round clip in less than 5 seconds, each shot finding a target at a distance where missing was nearly impossible. He ejected the empty clip, the distinctive metallic ping lost in the thunder of gunfire, and inserted a fresh clip in under 3 seconds. Around him, every Marine did the same. The volume of fire didn't diminish, it intensified. The Japanese had nowhere to take cover. At 50 yards, in dense jungle, on terrain they didn't know, caught in a pre-planned and perfectly executed kill zone, they died by dozens, then by hundreds. Those who tried charging forward met an impenetrable wall of lead. Those who attempted retreat found the same. Those who went to ground discovered that prone positions offered no protection against plunging fire from elevated marine positions. This was the new doctrine in action. This was what Puller had promised. This was cold-blooded, calculated, scientific killing refined to mathematical precision. Every Marine firing at targets so close that marksmanship became almost irrelevant, every bullet finding flesh. Every second bringing fresh casualties to an enemy caught in a trap of their own making. Garrett had thought the doctrine insane when he first heard it. Now, watching Japanese soldiers fall in windows before the sustained American fire, he understood. This wasn't courage. This wasn't bravery. This was industrial-scale slaughter disguised as tactics, and it was working beyond anyone's wildest expectations. The path to this tactical revolution had been paved with American blood and hard lessons learned in the opening months of the Pacific War. When the 1st Marine Division landed on Guadalcanal on August 7, 1942, they brought with them tactical doctrines developed during training at Quantico and New River. These doctrines emphasized long-range rifle fire, deliberate aimed shots, and engagement of enemy forces at maximum effective range. In the dense jungles of the Solomon Islands, these tactics proved catastrophically ineffective. The Battle of the Tenaru River on August 21, 1942, revealed the first cracks in conventional marine tactical thinking. Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki's 916 Japanese soldiers launched a night assault across the Tenaru sandbar against Marine positions. Marines opened fire at approximately 200 yards as Japanese forces emerged from the jungle. The result was chaotic and nearly disastrous. Post-battle ammunition counts told a disturbing story. Marines had expended approximately 75,000 rounds of 30-06 ammunition to kill 800 Japanese soldiers. This represented roughly 94 rounds per confirmed kill, an appalling efficiency ratio that alarmed Marine Corps planners. Worse, Japanese forces had penetrated Marine lines in multiple locations despite this massive expenditure of ammunition. Only the timely arrival of light tanks had prevented potential disaster. Statistical analysis from Tulagi, where Marine raiders had fought from August 7th through 9th, revealed similar problems. The 1st Marine Raider Battalion expended approximately 120,000 rounds of ammunition during 3 days of fighting. Japanese casualties totaled approximately 350 confirmed killed. This represented 343 rounds per kill, even worse than Tenaru. Battalion Commander Lieutenant Colonel Merritt Edson recognized immediately that something was fundamentally wrong with Marine tactical doctrine. The problem stemmed from multiple factors. First, accuracy degraded dramatically under combat stress. Peacetime marksmanship training emphasized slow, aimed fire at stationary targets on well-lit ranges. Combat presented fast-moving targets in poor visibility, often at night, while under fire. Marines trained to shoot at 300 yards found themselves unable to hit anything reliably beyond 100 yards under actual combat conditions. Second, muzzle flash and sound at long range revealed Marine positions without inflicting proportional casualties. Japanese infiltration tactics exploited this weakness brilliantly. Small Japanese units would deliberately draw Marine fire, mark the positions, then maneuver around them. Marines firing at 200 yards or more created tremendous noise and flash, but achieved minimal results while advertising their exact locations. Third, Japanese assault doctrine specifically anticipated American long-range fire. Japanese training emphasized rapid movement, use of terrain, and exploitation of the confusion created by American firing. Japanese soldiers were taught to charge through American fire, accepting casualties as necessary to close to bayonet range where Japanese training in close combat might offset American firepower advantages. The Battle of Edson's Ridge, also called Bloody Ridge, from September 12th through 14th, 1942, nearly proved catastrophic. Japanese forces attacked Marine positions repeatedly over 3 nights. Marines fired tens of thousands of rounds into the darkness, often at ranges exceeding 150 yards. Japanese forces suffered heavily, but continued penetrating Marine lines. Only desperate hand-to-hand fighting and the personal leadership of Colonel Edson prevented complete disaster. After-action reports from Bloody Ridge made sobering reading. Marine casualties totaled 103 killed and 426 wounded. Japanese casualties exceeded 600 killed. But the kill ratio, approximately 6-1, was far worse than expected given American firepower superiority. More disturbing, ammunition expenditure suggested Marines had fired approximately 200 rounds for every confirmed Japanese kill. At this rate, sustained combat would exhaust ammunition supplies faster than they could be replaced. Colonel Edson, Lieutenant Colonel Puller, and other senior Marine officers recognized that fundamental changes were necessary. The problem wasn't the weapons. The M1 Garand remained the finest infantry rifle in the world. The Browning automatic rifle provided excellent squad-level firepower. The Browning .30 caliber machine gun was utterly reliable. The problem was how these weapons were being employed. Edson began conducting experiments with different engagement ranges. He had Marines fire at targets placed at various distances, recording accuracy rates under simulated combat stress. The results proved revelatory. At 200 yards, under stress, average Marines hit man-sized targets approximately 15% of the time. At 100 yards, hit probability rose to 40%. At 50 yards, it exceeded 75%. The mathematics were compelling. If Marines could maintain fire discipline and allow Japanese forces to close to 50 yards before opening fire, they would achieve 5 times the hit probability compared to firing at 200 yards. More importantly, at 50 yards, every Marine, regardless of marksmanship skill, became deadly. The poorest shot in the battalion could reliably hit targets at 50 yards. This democratization of lethality transformed tactical possibilities. Puller took these findings further. He recognized that coordinated volley fire at close range would create psychological shock effects beyond mere casualties. Japanese assault tactics depended on momentum, on troops believing they could successfully close with American positions. A devastating volley at 50 yards would shatter that momentum instantly, stopping attacks before they could develop. The doctrine crystallized through September and early October 1942. Marines would prepare interlocking fields of fire with careful range estimation. They would hold fire until enemy forces reached precisely 50 yards. Then every weapon would fire simultaneously in coordinated volleys. The goal wasn't suppression. It was annihilation. The ballistics of the .30-06 cartridge told a story that most Marines never considered during peacetime training. When fired from an M1 Garand's 24-inch barrel, the 150-grain bullet left the muzzle at approximately 2,850 feet per second, generating 2,650 foot-pounds of energy. At 50 yards, that bullet retained approximately 2,400 foot-pounds, more than sufficient to penetrate human tissue, light cover, and continue through to secondary targets. But raw power meant nothing without hits. Marine Corps Weapons Training Battalion conducted exhaustive testing at Quantico in September 1942, and the results revolutionized tactical thinking. Captain James Roosevelt, son of the President and a Marine officer himself, supervised tests where Marines fired at man-sized targets under simulated combat stress. Instructors fired weapons near the shooters, detonated explosives, and shouted contradictory orders to replicate battlefield confusion. At 300 yards, even experienced Marines achieved only 8% hit rates under stress. At 200 yards, this improved to 15%. At 100 yards, it jumped to 40%. But at 50 yards, something remarkable occurred. Hit rates exceeded 75% for experienced Marines and remained above 60% even for recent recruits. The conclusion was inescapable. Every yard closer to the enemy dramatically increased lethality. The psychology of muzzle flash and sound provided equally compelling evidence for close-range engagement. When Marines fired at 200 yards, the sound reached Japanese soldiers approximately half a second after the muzzle flash. This delay, though brief, provided warning. Trained Japanese infantry could react, drop, and seek cover. At 50 yards, sound and flash arrived almost simultaneously with the bullet itself. There was no warning, no time to react, no possibility of evasion. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Major Lewis Walt, operations officer for the 5th Marines, developed the mathematical framework that transformed these observations into doctrine. He calculated that a Marine company of 200 riflemen firing at 200 yards would achieve approximately 30 hits per volley, assuming 15% accuracy. The same company firing at 50 yards would achieve 150 hits per volley, but the advantage extended beyond simple multiplication. Walt recognized that concentrated fire at close range created synergistic effects. Japanese soldiers, advancing in formation, would see not scattered casualties over extended time, but massive simultaneous casualties in a single devastating moment. The psychological impact of watching half your unit fall in seconds shattered cohesion and momentum far more effectively than gradual attrition over minutes. Weapons integration multiplied these advantages. The M1 Garand fired semi-automatically, allowing skilled Marines to place 8 aimed shots on target in under 10 seconds. The Browning automatic rifle, with its 20-round magazine and selective fire capability, could deliver sustained bursts at cyclic rates of 550 rounds per minute. The Browning 30 caliber machine gun, when properly employed with interlocking fields of fire, created kill zones where nothing survived. At 50 yards, these weapons systems transformed from individual tools into components of an integrated killing machine. Marines learned to coordinate fire so that M1 Garands engaged individual targets, BARs swept formation flanks, and machine guns delivered plunging fire into formation depth. The effect resembled industrial machinery more than traditional combat, each component performing its specific function with mechanical precision. Training at Camp Pendleton and New River incorporated these principles into exhaustive drills. Marines practiced holding fire, while instructors wearing Japanese uniforms advanced to marked 50-yard lines. The psychological difficulty of this restraint surprised trainers. Every Marine instinct screamed to fire at approaching enemies. Overriding that instinct required iron discipline and absolute confidence in the doctrine. Mock combat exercises validated the theory with startling results. In one exercise conducted at Camp Pendleton in late September 1942, a reinforced Marine company defended a prepared position against a simulated Japanese battalion attack. Using conventional tactics with engagement beginning at 200 yards, the defending Marines expended 30,000 rounds and killed approximately 200 attackers before being overrun. The same exercise repeated with the new 50-yard doctrine produced dramatically different results. Marines held fire until attackers reached the prescribed range, then delivered coordinated volleys. The attacking force suffered over 400 casualties in the first 30 seconds. Follow-up volleys brought total casualties to over 600. The attack collapsed completely. Defending Marines expended only 12,000 rounds, less than half the previous amount, while achieving 3 times the effectiveness. Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell Page, who would later earn the Medal of Honor on Guadalcanal, participated in these training exercises. He observed that the hardest part wasn't the shooting, but the waiting. Marines had to watch enemies approach, calculate ranges precisely, and trust that their officers would give the fire command at the correct moment. This required discipline that exceeded anything previously demanded of American infantry. The doctrine spread through the 1st Marine Division during October 1942. Every battalion conducted intensive drills. Officers paced off 50-yard distances and marked them with subtle terrain features. Machine gun crews registered final protective fires at precisely 50 yards. Rifle squads practiced coordinated volley fire until they could deliver it reflexively on command. Some officers resisted the new doctrine. Lieutenant Colonel William Maxwell of the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, initially argued that allowing Japanese forces to approach so closely risked being overrun. But Puller remained adamant. He had studied the mathematics, witnessed the training results, and understood that this doctrine represented nothing less than a revolution in infantry tactics. The proof would come soon enough when the Japanese 2nd Division launched its massive assault on Henderson Field on October 24, 1942. The Japanese 2nd Division, commanded by Lieutenant General Masao Maruyama, began its approach to Henderson Field on the afternoon of October 23, 1942. Intelligence estimates suggested 5,600 Japanese troops were moving through the jungle south of the airfield. Their objective was clear: capture Henderson Field and eliminate American air power in the Solomon Islands. Maruyama had assured his superiors that fanatical Japanese infantry would sweep aside the American defenders in a series of overwhelming night assaults. The 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Louis Puller, held the critical southern perimeter. Puller's 962 Marines occupied positions carefully prepared over the preceding weeks. Every field of fire had been cleared and registered. Every fighting position offered interlocking support to adjacent positions. Every Marine knew precisely where the 50-yard markers lay in the jungle before them. At 1900 hours on October 24th, Japanese artillery began preliminary bombardment. For 30 minutes, shells screamed into Marine positions. The barrage was heavy but poorly targeted, causing minimal casualties. Puller knew this bombardment signaled the imminent infantry assault. He moved along his lines, reminding company commanders of the fire discipline doctrine. Wait for 50 yards, no exceptions. At 1945 hours, the bombardment lifted. An eerie silence settled over the jungle. Then came the sounds Marines had learned to dread. Rustling vegetation, whispered Japanese commands, the metallic click of bayonets being fixed. The assault was beginning. Private First Class John Basilone manned a machine gun position on a small ridge overlooking a natural avenue of approach. His Browning .30 caliber was loaded, aimed, and ready. Through the darkening jungle, he could hear Japanese forces forming up for the attack. Beside him, his assistant gunner whispered nervously about the approaching sounds. Basilone told him to shut up and wait for the order. At 2000 hours, the first Japanese soldiers emerged from the jungle approximately 300 yards from Marine lines. They moved in, loose formations, rifles at the ready, advancing steadily toward positions they believed were lightly defended. Marine observers tracked their progress silently. 250 yards, 200 yards, 150 yards. Corporal Anthony Malinowski, a rifleman in Charlie Company, watched Japanese soldiers materialize from the jungle shadows. He could see their faces now, young men like himself, probably terrified but advancing nonetheless. His finger rested on his Garand's trigger guard. Every instinct demanded he fire. But Sergeant Morrison beside him held his hand raised, the signal to wait. Malinowski forced himself to breathe slowly, to trust the doctrine, to believe that this insane tactic would work. 100 yards. 75 yards. The Japanese were clearly visible now, dozens of them, then hundreds. They advanced in waves, each wave following close behind the one before. Standard Japanese assault doctrine: overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers and ferocity. They expected scattered American fire to begin any moment. They were prepared to charge through it, accepting casualties to close to bayonet range. 60 yards. Morrison's hand remained raised. Along the entire battalion front, over 900 Marines held their fire. The discipline was superhuman. Some Marines would later admit they prayed, others that they cursed, others that their minds simply went blank with fear. But none fired. 55 yards. Japanese soldiers began to sense something wrong. The Americans weren't shooting. Had they abandoned their positions? Was this a trap? Some Japanese officers shouted commands, trying to maintain formation cohesion as their advance began to waver. 50 yards exactly. Morrison's hand dropped. The word passed instantly. Fire! The jungle erupted in flame and thunder. Over 900 M1 Garands fired simultaneously. 40 Browning automatic rifles opened up. 20 Browning machine guns added their deeper roar. The coordinated volley hit the leading Japanese wave like a scythe through wheat. Men fell in windrows, cut down before they could react, before they could seek cover, before they understood what was happening. Basalone's machine gun traversed methodically left to right, delivering 6-round bursts into the packed Japanese formations. At 50 yards, he couldn't miss. Every burst found targets. Bodies piled up before his position as subsequent waves stumbled into the same killing zone. His assistant gunner fed ammunition belts smoothly, and Basilone maintained fire discipline, short bursts to prevent barrel overheating, each burst destroying another cluster of enemy soldiers. Malinowski fired his 8-round clip in 7 seconds, each shot finding a target. He reloaded in under 3 seconds and fired again. 8 more Japanese soldiers fell. Reload. Fire. Reload. Fire. The mechanical rhythm continued. Around him, every Marine did the same. The volume of fire didn't slacken. It intensified as Marines found their rhythm, as muscle memory took over from conscious thought. The Japanese assault broke within 90 seconds. Men cannot maintain forward momentum while watching their comrades destroyed en masse. The lead elements attempted to continue but found nowhere to go except into the wall of lead. Those attempting to retreat collided with follow-on waves still advancing. The confusion created even better targets for Marine gunners. At 20:15 hours, the first assault wave had been annihilated. Approximately 800 Japanese soldiers lay dead or dying in the jungle before Marine positions. Marine casualties: 3 wounded, none killed. Ammunition expenditure: approximately 25,000 rounds, roughly 31 rounds per confirmed kill. The improvement over Tenaru's 94 rounds per kill spoke volumes about the new doctrine's effectiveness. But the night was young, and Maruyama had 5,600 troops. The second wave attacked at 2100 hours, advancing over the bodies of the first. Again, Marines held fire to 50 yards. Again, coordinated volleys devastated the assault. Again, Japanese forces broke and retreated, leaving hundreds more dead. Third assault, 2300 hours. Fourth assault, midnight. Fifth assault, 0200 hours. Each time, Japanese forces approached through increasingly difficult terrain, stepping over their own dead, motivated by orders that promised victory through perseverance. Each time, Marines held fire to 50 yards. Each time, the resulting volleys tore the formations apart. By dawn on October 25th, the Japanese 2nd Division had ceased to exist as an effective fighting force. Battlefield counts later confirmed 1,217 Japanese dead in the 1st Battalion, 7th Marine sector alone. Marine casualties: 19 killed, 32 wounded. Ammunition expenditure: approximately 170,000 rounds total, roughly 142 rounds per confirmed kill across all 5 assaults. The mathematics validated the doctrine completely. Puller's battalion had achieved the most lopsided kill ratio in Marine Corps history to that point, and they had done so while conserving ammunition compared to previous battles. The secret was simple: let them get close, then kill them all at once. The devastation at Henderson Field demanded rigorous analysis. Within days of the battle, Marine Corps ordnance officers arrived to conduct forensic examination of the battlefield. What they discovered validated the 50-yard doctrine with scientific precision and revealed why this seemingly suicidal tactic had produced history's most lopsided infantry engagement. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Griffith, intelligence officer for the 1st Marine Division, supervised the battlefield survey conducted from October 27th through 30th, 1942. His team measured distances, examined wound patterns, analysed ammunition expenditure, and interviewed survivors from both sides. The resulting report, classified until 1968, became the foundation for Marine Corps close combat doctrine for the next 2 decades. Accuracy data proved most compelling. Griffith's team marked every Japanese body's position and traced bullet trajectories back to Marine firing positions. At the 50-yard engagement range, Marines had achieved 78% hit rates. This exceeded even the optimistic 75% predicted by training exercises. The explanation was simple. Under actual combat conditions, firing at masses of enemy soldiers at 50 yards made missing nearly impossible. Comparative analysis revealed the doctrine's mathematical superiority. At Henderson Field, Marines fired approximately 142 rounds per confirmed kill. At the Tenaru River 2 months earlier, using conventional long-range engagement, Marines had fired 94 rounds per kill, but against a smaller force in more favourable terrain. At Edson's Ridge, the ratio had been approximately 200 rounds per kill. The 50-yard doctrine represented a 50% improvement in ammunition efficiency while producing 3 times the casualties. Sound and light discipline advantages manifested in unexpected ways. Japanese survivors interrogated after the battle reported that the sudden, simultaneous eruption of fire created complete disorientation. At 200 yards, scattered shooting allowed soldiers to identify individual threats and react. At 50 yards, the wall of sound and flash created sensory overload. Men couldn't think, couldn't identify targets, couldn't coordinate responses. They simply died. Captain Henry Buse, battalion operations officer, analysed the psychological shock effect through careful documentation of Japanese unit cohesion. The first assault wave at Henderson Field had maintained formation discipline until the moment of fire. Within 15 seconds of the initial volley, unit cohesion had disintegrated completely. Men stopped advancing, stopped following orders, stopped functioning as organised military units. The shock of massive simultaneous casualties destroyed morale faster than gradual attrition ever could. Japanese tactical doctrine proved catastrophically incompatible with the 50-yard defense. Imperial Japanese Army training emphasized aggressive assault, closing rapidly to bayonet range and overwhelming defenders through superior fighting spirit. This doctrine assumed that American forces would begin firing at maximum range, allowing Japanese troops to advance through diminishing fire as defenders' morale broke. The 50-yard doctrine inverted these assumptions completely. When Marines held fire, Japanese commanders interpreted this as weakness or abandonment. They accelerated their advances, packed formations tighter for the final assault, and moved confidently into defeat, perfectly prepared kill zones. The moment of truth came not at 200 yards where Japanese doctrine anticipated it, but at 50 yards where their assault formations were most vulnerable and most concentrated. Machine gun effectiveness curves demonstrated why the Browning .30 caliber became decisive at close range. Marine Corps weapons testing at Quantico in early 1943, directly inspired by Henderson Field results, showed that machine gun effectiveness increased exponentially as range decreased. At 300 yards, a Browning required approximately 40 rounds to achieve 1 hit on a moving man-sized target. At 50 yards, this dropped to fewer than 5 rounds per hit. More significantly, at 50 yards, machine gun fire achieved penetration effects impossible at longer ranges. Bullets that hit one soldier continued through to hit soldiers behind him. Single bursts could incapacitate multiple enemies. This penetration effect multiplied casualties far, beyond simple hit probability calculations. Sergeant Basilone's machine gun, firing approximately 2,000 rounds during the night's fighting, was credited with over 150 confirmed kills, a ratio of 13 rounds per kill that seemed impossible until penetration effects were factored in. Weapons integration at 50 yards transformed individual weapons into a coordinated system. Rifles engaged point targets. Browning automatic rifles swept flanks and suppressed attempted flanking movements. Machine guns delivered grazing fire that created impenetrable barriers. At longer ranges, this integration remained theoretical. At 50 yards, it became mechanical reality. Major General Alexander Vandergrift, commanding the 1st Marine Division, ordered comprehensive ammunition analysis. The results astonished ordnance officers. Despite firing 170,000 rounds during 5 separate assaults, Puller's battalion had never approached ammunition exhaustion. The coordinated volley system meant Marines fired intensively for brief periods, then held fire during lulls. This pulse fire pattern conserved ammunition while maintaining maximum psychological effect. Post-battle ordnance examination revealed weapon performance under sustained combat. Every M1 Garand inspected after the battle remained functional despite extreme use. Barrels showed minimal wear. Actions remained clean enough for continued operation. The robust design that John Garand had perfected through 20 years of development proved itself under the harshest possible conditions. Machine gun barrels told different stories. Several Brownings showed heat damage from sustained fire. Basilione's gun barrel had turned blue from overheating, but continued functioning. This durability under abuse validated decades of Browning design refinement. Japanese weapons captured after the battle, by contrast, showed failures, jams, and breakages that would have proven fatal in sustained combat. The final analysis concluded that the 50-yard doctrine succeeded because it aligned weapon capabilities, human factors, and tactical reality into a coherent system. Marines weren't asked to perform impossible feats of marksmanship at extreme range. They were asked to maintain discipline until they could perform ordinary feats of marksmanship at close range. The difference proved decisive. The Henderson Field results could not be ignored. By November 1942, Marine Corps headquarters at Quantico had distributed preliminary tactical bulletins describing the 50-yard doctrine to all Marine divisions. Major General Thomas Holcomb, Commandant of the Marine Corps, personally endorsed the new tactics in a directive dated November 15, 1942. The revolution in close combat doctrine spread rapidly through the Corps, but Henderson Field represented ideal conditions: prepared positions, cleared fields of fire, and predictable enemy approach routes. The doctrine would face its greatest test at Tarawa, where Marines would assault fortified positions rather than defend them. Operation Galvanic, launched November 20, 1943, would prove whether close-range fire discipline could translate from defense to offense. The 2nd Marine Division, commanded by Major General Julian Smith, landed on Betio Island at Tarawa Atoll, facing the most heavily fortified position Americans had yet encountered. Japanese Rear Admiral Keiji Shibasaki commanded 4,500 elite troops occupying concrete bunkers, reinforced pillboxes, and interconnected defensive positions. Shibasaki famously boasted that 1 million Americans couldn't take Tarawa in 100 years. Marines adapted the 50-yard doctrine to offensive operations through brutal trial and error. During the first day's fighting on November 20th, conventional assault tactics produced catastrophic casualties. Marines attempting to advance across open ground toward Japanese bunkers suffered under long-range fire. Colonel David Shoup, commanding the 2nd Marines, recognized that modified close combat doctrine offered the only solution. Shoup ordered his Marines to advance in short rushes to positions exactly 50 yards from Japanese fortifications. Once at that range, concentrated volley fire would suppress bunker apertures while demolition teams moved forward. The doctrine required courage bordering on insanity. Marines had to advance into Japanese fire to reach the magic 50-yard distance. But once there, the devastating effect of concentrated fire at close range proved decisive. Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Murray, commanding the 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines, personally demonstrated the modified doctrine. Leading his battalion toward a Japanese strongpoint, Murray ordered his Marines to fix bayonets and advance to 50 yards. Once there, every rifle and BAR fired simultaneously at the bunker's firing ports. The volume of fire, though, and incapable of penetrating the concrete structure, created a steel curtain that prevented Japanese defenders from returning effective fire. Demolition teams then destroyed the position with satchel charges. By November 23, when organized Japanese resistance ended, Tarawa had cost 1,969 Marine casualties, including 1,000 wounded and 996 killed. But Japanese casualties exceeded 4,200 confirmed dead, with only 17 prisoners taken. The kill ratio, though less favorable than Henderson Field's defensive engagement, still demonstrated American tactical superiority, achieved partially through close-range fire discipline. The doctrine evolved further at Saipan from June 15 through July 9, 1944. The mountainous terrain and extensive cave systems required additional modifications. Marines discovered that the 50-yard doctrine worked exceptionally well against Japanese positions in caves. Concentrated fire into cave mouths at close range forced defenders deeper into their positions, allowing flamethrower teams and demolition experts to seal or destroy the caves. Captain Louis Wilson, commanding Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines, employed innovative variations during the assault on Fonte Hill. Wilson's Marines would advance to 50 yards from suspected cave positions, deliver coordinated volleys to suppress fire, then rush forward while defenders remained suppressed. This technique, dubbed suppression and rush, became standard doctrine for cave warfare throughout the Pacific. Peleliu, from September 15 through November 27, 1944, presented the most extreme close-range fighting of the Pacific War. The 1st Marine Division faced Colonel Kunio Nakagawa's 11,000 Japanese defenders, occupying the most sophisticated defensive positions yet encountered. The Umobrogol Ridge complex contained over 500 reinforced caves connected by tunnels, creating a three-dimensional battlefield where 50-yard doctrine required adaptation to vertical combat. Lieutenant Colonel Lewis Walt, now commanding the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, developed tactics for fighting in the Umobrogol's nightmare terrain. Marines would advance to positions overlooking cave entrances, establish firing positions at precisely 50 yards distance accounting for elevation, then deliver plunging fire into cave mouths. This vertical application of 50-yard doctrine proved devastatingly effective, but produced brutal casualties. The 1st Marine Division suffered over 6,000 casualties at Peleliu before Army units relieved them. Training manuals codified these battlefield innovations. Marine Corps publication FMFRP 12-80, Close Combat Tactics, issued in January 1945, incorporated lessons from Henderson Field, Tarawa, Saipan, and Peleliu. The manual specified 50 yards as optimal engagement range for coordinated infantry fire, provided detailed procedures for maintaining fire discipline, and included diagrams showing interlocking fields of fire at various ranges. Resistance from traditional officers persisted despite overwhelming evidence. Lieutenant Colonel William Maxwell, who had initially opposed the 50-yard doctrine, finally accepted it after Tarawa. But Colonel James Masters, commanding the 21st Marines at Guam, continued advocating for long-range engagement until August 1944, when his regiment suffered disproportionate casualties using conventional tactics. Masters was quietly relieved, and the 21st Marines adopted standard close combat doctrine. Statistical validation accumulated with each battle. Marine divisions consistently achieved kill ratios exceeding 10-1 when employing 50-yard doctrine. Ammunition efficiency remained superior to conventional tactics. Casualties, while never light in Pacific fighting, remained significantly lower than operations where Marines departed from the doctrine. Japanese forces attempted countermeasures, but found few effective responses. Some units tried nighttime infiltration to avoid the devastating daylight volleys, but Marines simply applied the same doctrine during darkness. Other Japanese commanders attempted to keep forces dispersed until the last moment before assault, but this prevented concentration of force needed to achieve breakthroughs. The 50-yard doctrine had no good counter because it exploited fundamental limitations of human accuracy and psychology. By mid-1945, every Marine in the Pacific Theater had trained extensively in close combat doctrine. The technique that had seemed suicidal in October 1942 had become standard operating procedure. The revolution was complete. The psychological toll of holding fire while enemies approached extracted a price that statistics never captured. Corporal Thomas Garrett, who survived Henderson Field and 3 subsequent campaigns, suffered recurring nightmares for 50 years after the war. He would wake screaming, reliving those terrifying moments watching Japanese soldiers approach while his finger trembled on the trigger. Marine Corps psychiatric records from 1945 through 1950 documented over 3,000 cases of combat stress, directly attributed to the extreme discipline required by close-range engagement. Doctrine. Fire discipline occasionally broke down with catastrophic results. At Cape Gloucester on December 26, 1943, Private Leonard Foster opened fire at 120 yards despite orders to hold. His premature shooting triggered a chain reaction along the line. The resulting scattered fire warned Japanese forces, who took cover and launched a successful flanking attack. Foster's breakdown cost 12 Marine lives and taught commanders that the doctrine required not just training but constant reinforcement. Friendly fire incidents increased at close ranges. At Peleliu on September 23, 1944, converging Marine units engaged Japanese forces simultaneously from opposite directions at 50 yards. In the chaos, 23 Marines died from American bullets. Major Raymond Davis, investigating the incident, concluded that close-range doctrine required absolute clarity about unit boundaries and fields of fire. Subsequent training emphasized coordination to prevent similar tragedies. Post-war military historians recognized the 50-yard doctrine as revolutionary. Colonel S.L.A. Marshall, conducting combat interviews throughout the Pacific, concluded in his 1947 study, Men Against Fire, that close-range engagement represented the most significant tactical innovation of World War II. British military analyst Basil Liddell Hart wrote in 1950 that American Marines had rediscovered ancient principles. Let the enemy approach, then strike with overwhelming force at the decisive moment. The doctrine influenced Korean War tactics directly. When Chinese forces launched mass infantry assaults during winter 1950 through 51, Marine and Army units employed identical 50-yard defensive doctrine. At the Chosin Reservoir, 1st Marine Division units achieved kill ratios exceeding 20-1 using tactics perfected at Guadalcanal 8 years earlier. The frozen Korean terrain differed dramatically from tropical Pacific islands, but the mathematical principles remained identical. Modern military doctrine retains these principles despite technological changes. Current Marine Corps training emphasizes weapons hold procedures where units maintain fire discipline until optimal engagement range. The specific distance has changed with modern weapons, but the underlying concept that disciplined patience produces superior results remains fundamental to American infantry tactics. Captured Japanese. Documents revealed enemy recognition of American tactical superiority. A report dated March 1945 from General Tomoyuki Yamashita, commanding Japanese forces in the Philippines, noted that American ability to deliver concentrated fire at shockingly close range made traditional Japanese assault tactics obsolete. Yamashita recommended avoiding American defensive positions entirely, tacit admission that Japanese forces had no effective counter to the 50-yard doctrine. Statistical vindication came through comprehensive casualty analysis. From August 1942 through August 1945, Marine divisions in the Pacific achieved an average kill ratio of 12.3-1. Pre-doctrine engagements like Tulagi achieved ratios of approximately 6-1. The improvement directly correlated with adoption and refinement of close combat tactics. The comprehensive statistical record of Pacific War infantry combat validates the 50-yard doctrine with mathematical certainty. Marine Corps Historical Division Analysis, published in 1953, compared engagement data from 47 major battles between August 1942 and August 1945. The numbers tell an unambiguous story about the superiority of disciplined close-range engagement. Pre-doctrine battles from August through October 1942 showed Marines expending an average of 137 rounds per confirmed enemy kill. Post-doctrine battles from November 1942 through war's end averaged 83 rounds per kill, a 40% improvement in ammunition efficiency. Across 3 years of sustained combat, this efficiency translated to millions of rounds conserved and thousands of enemy soldiers killed who might otherwise have survived. Casualty ratio comparisons proved even more dramatic. Pre-doctrine engagements achieved average kill ratios of 6.2 Japanese casualties per Marine casualty. Post-doctrine engagements averaged 12.3 to 1. At Henderson Field specifically, the ratio reached 64 to 1, though this extreme outlier reflected ideal defensive conditions unlikely to be replicated. Economic analysis revealed the doctrine's financial impact. The United States spent approximately 42 cents per round of .30-06 ammunition, including manufacturing, shipping, and storage costs. At pre-doctrine expenditure rates of 137 rounds per kill, each Japanese casualty cost $57.64 in ammunition alone. Post-doctrine rates of 83 rounds per kill reduced this to $34.86, a 40% cost reduction that saved tens of millions of dollars across the entire Pacific campaign. Time motion studies conducted at Quantico in 1944 analyzed engagement sequences. Marines using conventional long-range engagement typically spent 4 to 7 minutes in sustained firefights before achieving tactical objectives. Marines using 50-yard doctrine typically achieved the same objectives in 90 seconds to 2 minutes. This time, compression reduced exposure to Japanese return fire and decreased casualty rates significantly. Medical data from Navy combat surgeons provided grim validation of close-range effectiveness. Wounds inflicted at 50 yards showed dramatically different characteristics than those from longer ranges. The .30-06 bullet retained maximum velocity and energy, creating massive wound channels with extensive tissue damage. Japanese soldiers wounded at 50 yards had a 12% survival rate compared to 43% for those wounded at ranges exceeding 100 yards. Close-range engagement didn't just kill more efficiently, it killed more permanently. Japanese force degradation analysis showed the cumulative impact of American tactical superiority. In August 1942, Japanese infantry divisions retained 70 to 80% combat effectiveness after initial engagements. By mid-1944, Japanese units commonly lost 50 to 60% effectiveness in first contact with Marines. This degradation reflected not just casualties but psychological factors, the terror of facing an enemy who waited with inhuman patience before delivering devastating fire. The ultimate conclusion remains inescapable. Cold-blooded patience, supported by superior weapons, training, and industrial capacity, won the Pacific War at the infantry level. Marines who forced themselves to hold fire while enemies approached, who trusted the doctrine despite every instinct screaming to shoot immediately, achieved the most efficient infantry combat performance in modern military history. The 50-yard doctrine transformed war from an emotional reaction into a calculated science, and the mathematics proved decisively superior to courage alone. Incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.